Welcome to the SKADI Podcast. In this episode, Nic and Damian sit down with Sam Tyfield in Shoosmiths' fancy new podcast suite at their London HQ. Sam is a partner at Shoosmiths, specialising in corporate M&A, but also has previous experience as the COO and General Counsel at a high-frequency trading firm. This background, and his experience on the regulatory side of markets, gives him a unique insight into some of the hot topics in financial markets at the moment. In a plethora of acronyms, they talk HFTs, NFTs, PFOF, and much more. We hope you enjoy this episode of the SKADI Podcast.
Well, we're here on the next episode of the SKADI Podcast. We've got an absolute rip-roarer for you. We are talking about all things topical in the markets. I've come here with colleagues Damian and Josh to talk about meme investing, payment for order flow, cryptocurrency. I mean, we'll really see where the questions go. So, Sam Tyfield of Shoosmiths, why am I sitting in front of a corporate M&A lawyer?
Well, are you? Are you really? I was a corporate M&A lawyer. I like to think I still am. But back in the day, I accidentally became Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel for a high-frequency trading firm.
I knew we were in the right place, DT.
Yes. So ever since then, the world of mine has been regulated trading,
Right.
and all things algorithmic and technology related, which used to be, I do have to say, fairly esoteric and narrow, but now everyone's an algo trader.
Yeah.
There is an algorithm somewhere in everybody's tech stack, and it has worked its way down in the same way that the technology in Formula One cars has worked its way down into your Ford Focus. What used to be cutting edge as far as technology in financial services is concerned is now commoditized.
I mean, that's absolutely true. And Damien, you're closer to this than me, because I remember the good old days of the careful discretion order. I mean, you've used algos, right?
I have, yes. I mean, I did run a hedge fund for a while, and that was algorithmically driven. So, but that was at a pretty basic level, mostly, the calculations were done through Excel, shockingly enough, and then spewed out from there. But I mean, I think Sam's right. There's been a massive leap forward, and actually, it's flowed all the way down to retail players. I mean, you can log into various bits of kit these days as a retail trader. There's a platform called MT4. You could get people to write algorithms for that. I mean, you could either write them yourself. It's in relatively basic coding sort of language, or you can pay someone on the street to write that for you. And and you could have a job and have that running in the background, and off you go.
Yeah, I mean, you can buy algorithms off various providers on the internet to do certain things. You plug in the parameters that you want, or the type of trading strategy that you're looking for, your limits, and away it goes. You just add them one on the other like building blocks. I think the main issue there is with precisely what you just said, which is you build it and then you can go away and do your normal day job. There was a case about 5 years ago now where somebody in the US did exactly that, built an algorithmic trading system and then let it run. And when he went to work, he was hundreds of thousands of dollars in the black. By the time he came home, he was $500,000 in the red. Unless you are taking that professional approach of watching the strategy as it runs, you're not trading.
I mean, think about. I mean, that's a sort of individual example, but I mean the massive example, night trading.
Exactly
who thought they were operating in the compliance environment, I think, or no, the test environment, didn't they? Didn't think it was in the market, and catastrophically, I think it was running for nearly half a session.
They lost all of that money in 45 minutes.
45 minutes, man.
While they tried to work out what was going wrong. When they knew they were hemorrhaging money, they just couldn't work out what bit of the system they needed to turn off to stop it happening. That must have been terrifying to watch that screen on that particular day.
I know. I mean, I wonder who felt worse, the IT guy or the trader. I don't know.
Traders are always very bullish. I'll make it back tomorrow.
And how did the legal counsel feel in that circumstances? So that's it. That's the algo side of stuff, which, I mean, as you say, I mean, that's very mainstream. But the kind of stuff that you guys are describing, I think, is almost for the man in the street now. Is that right? Or is that an exaggeration?
No, it's not an exaggeration. The man in the street, and it is usually a man, of between the age of 18 and 35, can get hold of these tools and plug them in pretty much into whatever asset class he likes.
That's absolutely mind-boggling and incredible.
Yeah, and I assume the sort of the Robin Hood story that we've seen in the last few years, and that whole bringing commissions down to zero has been a huge part of that. And I suppose you would argue, well, there are arguments on either side of whether that's been a good thing or a bad thing. That whole commoditization, gamification of the markets. I mean, it has obviously its consequences, but it has brought a lot of people into the market that wouldn't have been there, 5 years ago. And actually, would you argue that they are now financially savvy? I'm not sure, but certainly maybe they're on a road to progression to some sort of financial knowledge, which is no bad thing.
That's a take that I hadn't considered, actually, that there is a learning curve involved in every single thing we do. Mm-hmm. And yeah, firms hire people straight out of university, or even not from university, to teach them how to trade.
Yeah.
The difference is they don't generally let them loose on the markets live until they have a relatively fair understanding of how they work and what they're doing and what how the asset class behaves and where the correlations and inverse correlations exist. The trouble is we've got a huge population of new traders learning on the job. One day they will all be experienced traders who know what they're doing and know how to trade a butterfly or one asset class against another, or decent basis trading or whatever it is. But they're learning on the job.
Yeah. Well, I think there has to be a question over where they're getting their information from, because when I was trading, and I don't trade anymore, thank goodness, enjoyed it very much, but I think it's a young man's game. The key I think to successful trading, or a large part, was discipline, but also information, flow of information. Yes. And I think there are probably questions over where information is coming to these people. And the danger is, if it's all coming from the same source, then you've got a correlation, right? I mean, is that something that we should be concerned of, Sam, or do you think that there's lots of disparate sources of information and we're all okay?
Well, it depends from what perspective you're looking at this. From a regulatory and market stability perspective, then we should be concerned, I think, because the sources of information available to these individual traders are heavily skewed towards social media.
Right.
And we don't know who's on social media. ESMA has taken the approach, or seems to be taking the approach now, where in its publicity to retail traders, it's focused on who's giving you the information, who is running the account that you're trusting, from which you are getting your information, and focus then on those who are running those accounts, saying you've got to be absolutely upfront about who you are, what conflicts of interest you may have, where your own sources of information and what your underlying intention is. And I suppose if we can track you down, we'll come knocking on the door. And the reason it's important from a systemic perspective is that we've seen with GameStop and with the silver squeeze, even for short periods of time, retail traders acting collectively can move markets quite strongly.
So is that the question I have then? I mean, that sort of behaviour that you're describing, that wasn't allowed 20 years ago. Why is it occurring now? Is the rule framework not up to date? Are we not up to speed? Are we not fit for purpose anymore? What have we got to do here?
I think it was not allowed all those years ago. Just the number and cost of accessing the markets was just not available in the same way that it is now. Technology has allowed me to go to the pub, have a really decent night out, and on the train home, pick up my mobile phone and deal in fairly complex derivative instruments.
Right.
Direct.
On margin.
Yes, on margin.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have existed back in the day. There are still legacy intermediaries out there who work for retail, who have a large element of advisory to their function and to what is expected of them, and one would hope that a properly in a proper relationship between me and an intermediary, someone would eventually step in and tell me not to be such an idiot. Don't do this. I'm not going to allow you to do that. You're just going to lose all your money, or your money is far too skewed towards one or another, and this is an incredible risk for you. That isn't there for quite a lot of those brokers. And that does beg the question then, whether the users of those other types of intermediary want that protection. And honestly, I don't think they do.
Yeah.
I hate to talk about Brexit, but who needs experts? There is very, very clearly the do your own research element to this. I don't need somebody telling me what to do because they have an agenda.
Yeah.
They are out to make commission from me, or they have a conflict of interest, or they're going to sell me something that I don't want because they want to sell it to me. And what they're missing, of course, is that there's an anonymous social media account who they trust.
Yeah.
That will have the same conflicts of interest, the same underlying self-absorption and personal interest in them doing or not doing something, but they are not regulated. There's nobody who can give them recourse if something goes wrong.
Yeah. So that's a very kind of different flow of information, right? Different sort of connection on the information. And I think that, the point you made is that what's making this so easy is just the low barrier to entry in terms of the commission rates. Because, you and I were looking at e-brokerage 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And it was going to be the brave new world. And it's not really happened, has it, until now? Now it's definitely here. But this was a journey we started, 20 years ago. I can remember we were trying to put this in place when we were both at ING, right? What is the thing, Dame? What's the change now that has meant that those barriers to entry have dropped so much? What's making it so cheap for everyone to get stuck in?
Well, I suppose it's something that Sam's been talking about a bit on LinkedIn. This sort of whole payment for order flow, which is this thing that sits underneath these brokers that allows them to offer seemingly commission-free trading. You could argue maybe that it's not, but anyway, underneath that, there are large high-frequency type traders that will pay for that flow. They want to know that the retail crowd is jumping into GameStop or AMC or whatever it may be, and actually that if they can get that information flow a microsecond, whatever, I'm not very good on what they are, a very short period of time before other people, that's of use to them, so they will therefore pay for it. So they are basically offsetting that cost that we used to pay, I would say 10 bips, but that's more in the, that's the sort of institutional type thing. As a retail trader, you'd be paying like 30, 40 bips, I suppose. And that just, that's now zero because it's being they're covering out at the other end of that, at the other end of the trade. And
so that's a huge. I mean, that's a huge benefit. Free trading is a huge benefit. Mm-hmm. Why is the regulator so concerned about payment for order flow, Sam?
The regulator is concerned because every single regulated institution has to have regard to conflicts of interest between it and its clients, or between its clients, and cannot be induced into offering or not offering a service or a quality of service due to factors that are not disclosed. It's the honest broker concept. And the argument is that payment for order flow introduces an insolvable conflict of interest between the broker and its retail client, or any client. Mm. If a broker is going to get paid to route orders to a particular market maker or to a particular systematic internalizer habitually, then there is the suspicion that he is going to ignore the potential upside if he routed it somewhere else, where potentially he is not going to get paid.
Right.
He's not going to route it directly onto the exchange through his membership. He's going to route it to a market maker because he's being paid for that. I
mean, isn't there one glaring control in all of this, which is like the best execution rules? As long as it's best execution, isn't that kind of okay? Is that a get out for these people?
No is the short answer as far as the regulators are concerned. Because if you have a conflict of interest, it is nigh impossible to be providing best execution.
So best execution's not really just about price?
No.
Right, okay.
So as an intermediary with a best execution obligation, one has to consider at each transaction the demands and desires of your client, whether it's speed of execution, certainty of execution, creditworthiness of counterparties. Do I need one block of in size, or am I happy to have it split up and executed over a certain period of time? What are my needs? And depending on those needs, there are a number of different ways in which you can execute your client's order. Right. They may not produce the same result. If I try and go into the market for a large block, and this is more relevant for wholesale, of course, but if I go into the market for a block, then I've shown all my hand, and I will skew the price one way or the other to a much greater extent than if I drip feed the order into the market to not show my hand. Mm. And there is a separate argument, particularly in the US, about orders like that, which are being drip fed into the market, being lent on by those who have, in quotes, an asymmetric information advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, and I have stopped trading, I suppose, about 5 years ago. But I remember seeing this. You would see on the order book, in London or wherever, well, even in London, certainly in the States, there would be 10,000 shares on offer, and you would put in to buy 10,000 shares at that price. And what would happen is, as you started to lift that in very small time increments, it would be picked up by a systematic internalizer, a high-frequency guy. You would get filled in 300 shares better than your price, but then the 10,000 would disappear because either way, they sell you 300 and then buy them, and then maybe buy some more because they're like, well, they've might take a bet on the fact that you've got a bigger order coming through. But you would very often try to buy the 10,000, you wouldn't get filled in the 10,000. You might get less at a slightly better price, but you haven't got the full amount. And then the stock would move ahead of you, and then then you're just constantly playing catch up, and you are chasing high frequency people. So I mean, and that used to happen a lot, and actually it's the sort of basis for that Michael Lewis book. He looked into that, and that IEX exchange, who set up that sort of throttle on orders because they felt that there was an unfair playing field out there, that people were just.
So this is happening because as you're describing there, you aren't trying to buy the 10,000. I know you are. Your intention is to buy the 10,000, but in fact, the order you're passing, because you're trying not to move the market and you're trying to be careful, is you're passing an order that's smaller. So had you gone in to buy 10,000, that you could have got the 10,000, right?
But not necessarily at the price you wanted. Because
correct. Not what they were showing on screen, no.
Why not where they were showing on screen?
Because
that's crazy.
Because there's a there's someone inside narrower than the bid that you can see on screen in a dark pool, as they used to be called, systematic internalizers, whatever you want, that would faster than you can move would go, okay, there's a buyer at 10,000 there, I'm going to sell him 300 because that allows me to see the order because I'm slightly better off than the screen is showing.
Right.
So I give them at 0.99. The guy's trying
So the intent, the 300 is coming on behalf of the seller, not because you're trying to buy 300 of your 10,000. You're trying to buy 10,000.
Correct.
But they just almost like slow the order down by a little sort of tap.
Well, they're not slowing. They're just faster than your order as it goes through the pipes is just a bit slower because they happen to be co-located at the exchange or whatever it is.
Wow.
Your connection via a web portal, you may have slower than average Wi-Fi connection, or it has to go to the local point at the end of your drive, which then has really fast fibre, but it stops at a number of points. These, if you're set up co-located, you'll have a 10 gig fire hose for data, which is physically very, very, very close to the exchange's matching engine.
So, well, I mean, if that's what you're armed with, then I can see why everyone's paying for order flow, right? I mean, that's an incredible advantage in the market. Really incredible.
It is.
But also, yes, absolutely. But also the interesting thing you see, and you saw in GameStop, is that when things start to get too volatile, these guys can switch their machines off. And then the market is left with very few players, very little liquidity. And these markets can move horrendously fast, big gaps left, right, and centre. I mean, this is, one of the big issues that you can, these high frequency guys they're not obligated to always be making a price. They will make it most of the time when they feel that it is ripe to do so, and they will make money every single day. They'll be profitable every single day of the year. But when things get really volatile, they can step out of the way. They just go, thanks.
I think that was a discussion that we had in the run-up to MiFID II in the EU, where, to a certain extent, high-frequency firms got hoisted on their own petard.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if you say you're providing liquidity, well, damn well we're going to make you do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that put them in the invidious position of potentially having to catch a falling knife.
Yeah.
So I think it would be wrong to give the impression that they just don't have to. There is a reason that it's not just that they make money every day, they don't lose huge amounts of money every day. And it's because they have decent risk management systems. And if it gets to the point where a certain the market in a certain financial instrument is so volatile that you cannot adequately predict what your risk is going to be or hedge that risk, it's like, right, okay, I'm out, I'm done, sorry. Which is fair enough. It is normal business practice to have everything's going south, or I have no idea what it's going to be doing in the next 1 second, fractions of a second, or the next 10 seconds, or the next 20 seconds. For the same reason that most people do not trade well, it's getting slower, it's getting faster and faster and faster, but let's call it the 1 minute after large announcements like the non-farm payrolls. you let the market go nuts,
Yeah.
and then
Find its level. Yeah.
find its level, and then you go back in.
Florida orange crop report, as your dad used to say.
And then we start talking about trading places.
So Sam, all of this stuff you've described, what kind of cases are generated from what we're discussing? What sort of stuff comes across your desk as a result of what we're talking about?
Lots of ambiguity. It's part of a much wider discussion around the supervisory and enforcement powers that the regulators have, particularly the FCA. But what it does create, more than anything else, is ambiguity and uncertainty. Am I providing best execution? Do I need to provide best execution? If you're a eligible counterparty, I don't owe you best execution obligations, but are you, the client or the regulator, going to treat me as having some sort of agency-like relationship with you where there is reliance, and therefore I have to treat you as if you are not an eligible counterparty? I have to treat you as somebody like more akin to a retail client and hold your hand and pat your head. That just creates difficulties for the markets. And for more than anything else, markets need certainty. And at the moment, there is very little. There is a lot of movement globally, and there is also, on a slightly related topic, an increasing fundamental connectedness of all things. So just take, for example, the FCA's rules on conduct and culture within firms. In and of itself, a very good idea. If you are running a firm, if one is running a firm where bullying is acceptable, then that culture, more likely than otherwise, is indicative of you not having a reasonable attitude towards compliance generally. So if your staff is bullying one another, then the likelihood is that you are also bullying the market. You don't care if your staff are abusing or manipulating the market. So there is a correlation there. I'm absolutely sure. But it is an indicator of how regulating firms and the markets is becoming more, and I hate the word, but it is there is no better word to describe what is happening, is holistic. And so everything that a firm does, everything that a firm doesn't do and its staff do and do not do is regulatable. And that is very difficult in the markets. So to drag it kicking and screaming back to what we've been talking about the gamification, retail trading and everything else like that, with this fundamental interconnectedness of all things, it then becomes very difficult to draw a distinction between categories of clients and what I need to do for people and what they should expect from me. What do they want? There's no room for, it's not even subtlety. There is no room for compartmentalization of the roles.
Well, it's a really interesting point actually, because I wonder how much of this has been brought about by 2008 financial crisis. But when I think about when we sort of started up SKADI and working in audit, and this was sort of like 2012, I certainly noticed that there was a different attitude to customers and what was expected of customers and how you behave with customers, but in particular institutional customers. It had very much changed from the days, 10 years earlier where, everyone was, big boys, they kind of knew how it all worked and so on. Mm-hmm. There was a much more emphasis, and I'm not saying, I think this is a good thing, in a duty of care. There was much more, and actually, the fact that there was an inkling of a thought of a duty of care, which I'm not certain there would have been 10 years earlier. But it was very, very interesting because, looking at some of the things, and I'm going sort of beyond the equity markets now. I'm sort of going into the world of kind of structured credit and some of the kind of hidden options that some of these instruments possess. Like I don't know, collapsing the equity tranche in a CLO, things like that, where because everyone's attitude was, well, it's only going to be sophisticated investors that are involved in this. They know it's a real risk, so it's okay. We can just take everyone out of the equity tranche and every other tranche, lead them to believe that we're never going to collapse it. And let's just collapse it and run off with the cash. And that obviously is seemingly horrific. But I can see, the arguments I used to have with people, nearly 10 years ago around this sort of stuff. Because it was all about, well, what was our attitude to the customer? Customer attitude has changed, right?
There are two points arising out of that. The first is that it is inevitable that intermediaries are going to feel that they need to play nicer with their customers and clients because each intermediary is not the only game in town. Your clients, particularly the sophisticated ones, will have 3 or 4 brokers on the speed dial. Mm-hmm. That if they don't like what you're doing, if you did do the dirty on somebody and collapse that particular tranche or whatever it was, they wouldn't call you again. They wouldn't need to. So there is an inevitable looking out for your clients because that's in the intermediary's own best interests. He wants to maintain a relationship. He's not going to do anyone over because ultimately in the longer term that's his relationship done.
But that's no different, right? That's always been the way.
But that's always been the way.
Yeah.
What has happened though is that what we've got is for retail, right? We're not dealing with eligible counterparty. For retail, genuinely there should be some rules about being good with your clients, being a good broker's the wrong word, a good husband to their assets and to their interests. Those rules probably need to be set out in writing, in rules and in principles. The big boys, with the eligible counterparties and the wholesale brokers, treated one another fairly-ish because otherwise they'd lose the business. Mm-hmm. What is happening is that those mandated rules, that mandated relationship that you have to have with a retail customer, is moving
right
to the eligible counterparty and wholesale end, and that is I don't think it's a good thing.
And is that coming about because the regulator's deciding, I'm going to write more rules because we need more rules? Or is it actually something that's coming out of the litigation market? Is it that clients have been a bit more litigious and therefore then the sort of the trade bodies are coming together going, kind of had a few hot spots here, maybe we need to put some stuff in place?
I'm not sure it's litigious. It is the regulator, and I'm talking specifically about the UK regulators, seeing themselves as the consumer champion. And so significant resources at the FCA are devoted to looking out for pensions and funeral plans and consumer credit and peer-to-peer, where there is significant risk to individuals, futures, livelihoods, pensions. But then what happens is that the differentiation, the distinction gets lost, and the entire market starts to be treated in the same way.
Right. And
truly, honestly, there is a difference between an eligible counterparty and a retail punter who's about to lose his pension to a fraudster. There is a huge difference, and there should be continuing to be a huge difference in the treatment of the wholesale markets and the retail markets, and that's getting lost.
Well, Sam, we've gone into the regulated stuff. Come on, let's go off piece. Let's get into the world of crypto. As far as I understand it, right, that's not regulated, or is it?
Well,
am I missing a trick there? Have we got regulation by the back door? What's going on?
Well, I don't think it's regulation by the back door, because if one is advising or arranging a transaction, then that is a regulated activity, and most likely should be, even if the underlying asset that you are advising on is not a regulated financial instrument. You're still advising or arranging or dealing as agent, or one of the headline activities that we're all used to talking about in the old school markets.
Right.
But it is important to remember that your crypto broker or your crypto advisor doesn't necessarily need to be authorised and regulated by any regulator anywhere. And anyone can set up.
Right.
That. Perhaps it will become, and should become, a little bit like the spot FX markets, where even though you don't necessarily need to be authorised and regulated because it's spot, the expectation now is that you will be, because there have been enough scammers out there, like the binary options lot, and people who would send money to an account outside the EU, as it was, but not too far outside the EU, and then find they could never get it back because it was a scam, or their money just disappeared into a black hole. That may be an interim step.
Right.
The difficulty with trading in cryptocurrencies and NFTs, which just in passing, I saw someone in writing describe JMW Turner as a physical NFT. Oh, is that where we are now as a human race? Is that where we are now? Anyway, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money, and very few people are going to make a lot of money.
And what are the things that we're seeing that where people are really going to lose money? I mean, I've read about things like rug pulls, for example. I mean, what's going on there, DT? Is that something you're up to speed with?
Not really, if I'm brutally honest. But I think within the cryptocurrency universe, I think there are some what you would call legitimate names, big names that will be here, hopefully, in 10 years' time. But there are a lot of very dubious. I mean, I think to set up your own coin and pump and dump it is pretty easy to do these days if you know what you're doing and you have a certain amount of technical know-how. And there are rug pulls, as it were, that go on in these sort of names where you set it up, you list it, and then you sort of talk it up, hype it up wherever it may be on whatever message board you fancy.
Yeah.
Suck a lot of people in and cash out at the top, and literally this thing will go from, I'll get it all, 0.1 to 20, and it'll be back at 0.1, 0.2, and you, the originator, have cashed out whatever, a lot of money sometimes, tens of millions of dollars, yes. And this is, so yes, there's no regulation around setting these things up. It's not like if you wanted to IPO a stock. I mean, you know, to list a new.
Well, you see, on that, there is a relatively short dotted line between the rug pull, setting up your own crypto asset, cryptocurrency token, and the issues that we've had with SPACs.
True.
In the real world, which that one recently, which was going to launch that new social network Truth, that went to the moon to coin a meme phrase, and then came crashing back down.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anything's going to happen with that particular SPAC.
Yeah.
Or all of its plans are going to come to very little. So it's a similar thing, but that exists in the old school real world.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've mentioned that, you know, that sort of one thing, the pump and dump, and I sent you, Sam, do you remember that message board that I'd seen?
Yes.
Which I find incredible. So, you know, Discord, putting around, and how I got onto that, I had you know, wanting to get my hand in and understand all these platforms. I did open an account with eToro. I was trading a bit of crypto. I published a trade, as you do, on the message board, you know, showing everyone how successful I was as a trader. Did they want to follow me or whatever you can do? And I got a comment back, and I was very excited. What's this comment? When I clicked on it, oh, you know, the big news is here. Click this Discord. I clicked on it, and I found myself on this pump and dump forum. You know, a forum set up in plain sight, which comes and advertises to you when they're about to pump some coin. I've never gone on and found out what coin, because I don't want to get involved in that kind of stuff. But I was just so taken aback by how brazen that approach is, but also how out of control on so many levels. There's no control, one at eToro, there's no control at Discord. Are they? I mean, they must be leaving themselves wide open, Sam, or are they not?
No, I don't think there was that huge thing that the 45th President of the United States didn't like what was being published about him on Twitter. So he was going to abolish Section 23? I don't know of what act, but it's there is a generally accepted rule in the US and outside the US that platforms are not responsible for the contents of the platform if they don't publish it. They're not publishers.
Right.
They are merely providing somebody else with a conduit to publish something. They would have to get rid of that in order for Twitter or for any other social media platform to be responsible for the content of the site. It happens occasionally with Facebook's platform, where they will try and monitor for and remove sexual abuse images or racist or homophobic material. I'm not sure that is a legal obligation per se of theirs, and certainly no one would hold them. Well, no one. People would struggle to hold them legally liable for a photographic image of some sexual abuse that appeared on their platform if they did not remove it. They are not the one publishing it. They are the ones who haven't noticed it's there or didn't remove it.
Right.
So we should be very careful thinking along the lines of making somebody who runs a platform or a forum legally responsible for what's on there.
Right. Okay. Well, I can see that.
The ramifications. Who knows where it will stop?
No, I can see that. But I think there is also, an argument that these people ply their trade from technology and being able to scrape stuff and do stuff. I find it amazing that you can't track some of this stuff and prevent it from reaching the public. and I guess what it needs to take is it needs for enough retail people to lose money that it becomes a social issue, and then people will act on it. Because obviously the things you're describing are social issues, right?
Yes.
Terrorism or pornography or whatever, you know, that people find unacceptable. And maybe we're not quite far enough away from the kind of throes of the financial crisis that people care enough about people losing money.
I think that's probably true. The difficulty then, okay, in fairness to the politicians and the regulators, the line that they're having to tread is to try and limit the loss to retail without it already have becoming catastrophic. And until it becomes catastrophic, there isn't a problem. So they are. I am trying to recognise that the problems with which they must have to wrestle, but they're saying this is a problem, and everyone goes, well, it's not, because my eToro account has $250,000 in it. It's not a problem until it is a problem, but by the time it's a problem, who are you going to bail out? Or actually, who are you going to, from whom are you going to seek recompense? And we're coming full circle back to the duties owed.
Yeah.
Because there was some FCA research published recently where an astonishing majority of the retail traders who are piling into meme stocks and into cryptocurrencies and crypto assets don't really regard it as anything more than gambling. And yet they still feel that they're not likely to lose it all. They're not likely to suffer a catastrophic loss. What happens when they do?
Right.
From whom do they seek recompense? Or does the regulator turn around and say, you're entitled to all the upside. Let's assume that you invest in some token that nobody is pump and dumping, but it is going to go up. You are sitting on tens of thousands of pounds or dollars in profit. Congratulations, well done. You can retire now. You take the profit, but what happens when it goes the other way? Are you entitled also to be made whole by somebody? And I think the expectation among quite a lot of the retail traders is that they will be made whole because something's always somebody else's problem. Somebody else's fault. I lost money not because I listened to a Discord chat who had a pump and dump joke, but that itself was the scam because he's pumping and dumping you who's teaching. No. You're always, if you can't recognise the mark, you are the mark in all of these things. So I think somebody along the line has to accept that there are going to be losers here. But I don't think anyone can allow it to be that sort of catastrophic.
Well, turning that on its head, and you've talked about how this is like gambling really, and people don't appreciate it. Something that was really presented which was gambling, but was presented almost as investment, was Football Index, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was sort of and that really has been catastrophic for people, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think that has, and people. Yeah, there's no FSCS compensation or anything. You're literally your paper portfolio, and that's what it was. It would paper profits.
If someone's someone's listening and doesn't know about Football Index, if you've got a quick skinny for them about what the ins and outs of that was, or maybe Sam has.
No, I defer.
Well, I'll get it slightly wrong, I'm sure, but it was a way theoretically of buying a player performance. So you would set up a team, or you'd buy more than a team. You'd buy as many players as you wanted, and they would be paid out a dividend based on how they did that week. So these things were theoretically going up in value, but actually at the back end, they were just issuing more and more of these players. And then theoretically, you could buy and sell and trade these things between each other. But there came a time when the money ran out, as it were, and there was a sell back to the market, I think, function that was cancelled. And then there was, you could theoretically either sell it to the market or sell to somebody else, and there was just no bid for these things. So your paper profit that was up at 20 grand was now worth $8,000 and now stuck, I assume, in court proceedings until all that sort of wound up. So I mean,
and really, I mean, that was the case, and there were other things, but it's the way that it was described to people, wasn't it? The stock market of football and invest and dividends. I mean, these are not gambling phrases, right? Dividends. I mean, that is a stock market phrase, right?
Quite, yeah, absolutely. And yes, I mean, the whole thing has been a complete mess. I really don't know what's going to come of it, but it wasn't, wasn't good by any accounts.
Well, Sam, we're coming up to year end, and we're probably coming up to the end of the podcast. But I've got to ask you, a bit of a horrible question, but what's your prediction for next year? What's the banana skin that we should be looking out for in this space, perhaps, or indeed another one? What's on the horizon scan for you?
Well, we've got the MiFID II review in the EU, which they hope will introduce things like a consolidated audit trail for equities at least. There will be some amendments to infrastructure and market transparency rules. Any amendments at an EU level is going to lead to some sort of Brexit-related kerfuffle. They have just extended the clearing exemption for EU-denominated derivatives so that they can continue to be cleared in the UK. That is just another can being kicked down the road. So that they will eventually run out of road.
Yeah.
And they'll have to do something about that. And that's probably more focused on the wholesale side. But like you and your Discord pump and dump forum, I have heard that there's going to be they're planning another silver squeeze.
Right. Wow.
So exactly. It's like you do not announce these things. Really? We'll go through this whole cycle again. There'll be something else. There'll be another meme stock. There will be there'll be new NFTs, or there will be a crash in the NFTs because people will find out that all you have to do is screenshot, press Control P, and suddenly the NFT that is worth $1 gazillion because it's unique is sitting on somebody else's wall because they've just pressed Control P on a nice colour printer. There's bound to be something like that. But the whole kerfuffle of the internet connectedness of all things will continue. It'll just get more confusing.
Well, on that confusing note, Sam, I really want to thank you,
thank you
for elucidating so much there. That's been really great to talk to you. Really appreciate it. And Damian, what exciting for us to get on with another episode. But thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the SKADI Podcast. Don't forget to find us on LinkedIn and all other social media. See you shortly for our next episode.